This is the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game.
Rule number one is you have to believe in yourself. You're the only one who doesn't think you belong in this appointment. The prospect has already validated your existence by scheduling time with you. Get it through your head you belong here, go in there, crush it, and close the deal.
A place where sales professionals can come to learn from other sales professionals and thought leaders that have mastered their craft.
The difference between a good salesperson and a best-in-class salesperson is only 2 minutes. By spending an extra 2 minutes on what you might think is a mundane task in the sales game, you separate yourselves from the pack, you grow your book of business, you close more deals, and you retain your accounts.
As well as their peers who are still striving for perfection to achieve their why.
I have a wife and 4 kids. Failure is not an option.
Real sales professionals, real stories, real results.
It's no different than being a professional baseball player. You can't be a one-trick pony. You have to be a 5-tool player in order to succeed in this game.
This is the Power Producers Podcast, production redefined. Are you ready to feel the power?
Hey everybody, welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. Today, we have Mr. Joe Clevenger on the podcast with Kyle and I. What is going on, Joe?
Not a lot. It's Warsaw, Indiana, so there's not much action today.
What does action in Warsaw, Indiana look like? I mean, if you were to tell me there was action, what would that be?
Well, we're orthopedic capital of the world, so that tells you how exciting it is. We got a bunch of engineers here, so they're exciting people to hang out with.
I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, and I mean no disrespect to anybody at all in the engineering profession, but having been in meetings with engineering firms regarding insurance, I will never pursue that class of business.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I mean, I appreciate the way their mind works, not when I'm trying to explain total cost of risk.
Oh, man.
Yeah. No, Warsaw's a great town. It's a small town. I think population's like 15,000, but we have a lot of lakes, so we enjoy those.
Yeah, I noticed, man, boating seems to be one of your deals. Do you guys ski too, or?
Not yet. We're trying to get into it right now. The kids are a little small for it. Our oldest, she's gotten up on skis, but and she wants to learn now. She wants to learn like wakeboarding and wake surfing and all that stuff, but that's an expensive hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah, any of the water sports are, man, it's ridiculous how much that stuff costs. I got into wakeboarding was just starting to come on to more mainstream stuff. We used to go.
I would love to see you wakeboarding. That would be fantastic.
You will never see it because I've never been on one. But as I was saying, Kyle, I had gotten into kneeboarding.
Oh, there you go.
Which would probably be better for you to see me do than wakeboarding. But that was the big deal everybody was trying to do. We used to go to this lake in South Carolina every summer when I was a kid. And, I could ski with, 2 skis. I could slalom. I could kneeboard and all of that. And then I quit doing it. And for like 3 years, I didn't go. And I had grown up. I wasn't fat then, but I had grown up. And I'll never forget it because I just thought I was going to get out of the water the first time. And I just about ripped my wrists off both of my arms from the thing trying to pull me out. So it's interesting sport, but it's fun, man. I enjoy it. Why don't you spend a little bit of time to talk a little bit about how you got in the insurance industry and tell us a little bit about your agency?
Yeah, I was basically born into the insurance industry. So my father started the agency in '95. He was working at an independent agency and then broke off, started his own agency in '95. And so I kind of I was in the office all the time with him when he started. He started from scratch and just, we would go in and hang out in the office after hours while he was chugging away. Then I went to IU, had all these this ambition and all these things I wanted to do out of college, and didn't quite make it out. I partied a little hard. So when you do that, you tend to get bad grades, and so that was a tough conversation I had to have with my parents on why I was getting kicked out.
Mr. Blutarski, you have no grade point average. Yeah, listen, I think it happens to the best of us, man. It's funny because I'm trying to remember what book it was. I don't remember if it was Freakonomics or if it was something that Malcolm Gladwell wrote. It may have been one of Gladwell's books. But basically what it said was that the average Fortune 500 CEO was a 2.0 student in college. And the reason why they are so successful is because they didn't take their education as seriously as other people did. So
it developed social skills.
Understood the social aspect, and that allowed them to progress through corporations. They always had the intellect. They were just immature, right? And if I look back at myself, I've always been a relatively intelligent person. I'm not going to say I'm the smartest guy. I'm not Elon Musk, but I mean, I can hold my own if I need to on Jeopardy or whatever. I just didn't have the motivation or the maturity to make it through. And so I took the Chris Farley route, and 8 years later, I graduated.
Well, you made it through.
Yeah, I did. Working 80 or 90 hours a week, stocking pork and beans all day and going to class at night. It was not optimal. So, I learned my lesson. I took it a lot more seriously at that point. All that proves is that I had the ability to do it to begin with. I just didn't use my ability right. And I think that as we get older and we mature more and start looking at things from different perspectives, it's easier to align your talent with your motivation and your execution.
Oh, absolutely. And, so that was a big thing for me, is getting booted out, having to talk to the parents. And my dad said, well, you're coming back. You don't have a job, so you're going to work for me. He was getting ready to have open heart surgery. So it was kind of like, hey, I'm going to be down and out. I need to trust somebody, at least in the office, to handle payments and go to the bank and do all that stuff. So that's kind of where I got my foot in the door from that side of it. So I started in 2006. I think it was 2006 working for him. And then my wife joined the agency in 2007 after she did graduate early from college. So she's the smart one. I've definitely married up in the whole thing, and she had to marry down to my level. So,
for sure.
As we all have, Joe. not alone in this conversation.
So after that, I just jumped right into the insurance industry, got my butt kicked a little bit, and then in 2017, my father was enjoying Florida more than he was enjoying Warsaw, Indiana in the winter. So we had to have a conversation on like, hey, you know what? There's stuff that's got to get done in this at this place, and I can't make decisions with your money. I need to be making it with mine. So nice. My wife Gina and I bought the agency from him, and since they're kind of grown through acquisitions, and now we're trying to focus more on some organic growth here in the last year.
And if I remember from times you and I have talked in the past, your wife's kind of in the benefit side, right?
She is. She's really big into the benefit side. That's kind of where she loves it. I mean, she's just a cold caller. She was on, I think last week you had a call, and Kelly was on it from APP, and she was on that call, and she's like, yeah, everything he said just makes sense. It's just I got to do it. To pick up the phone and make the calls. So yeah, she's not scared.
I wonder if she was on the one from I was on one last week with Advisor Evolved on landing.
Yeah, that might have been what it was with Chris.
That's probably what it was. Yeah.
Yep.
Kelly's good too. Don't get me wrong. I like Kelly. I just wasn't on a podcast or anything with her. I need to be. She's a smart lady. Yeah. So what's the mix of the agency in terms of PNC versus benefits and all of that?
Yeah, so we're about 30% commercial lines, 30% benefits, and then the remaining is personal lines.
I'm going to help you there. That would be 40%.
40%.
See, I told you, man. I can make it through basic math. But it's interesting. So you've grown that. I mean, you mentioned acquisitions. You're in an area that you basically said was not like a thriving metropolis. So I can't imagine that there's like dozens of agencies that you can acquire in the general vicinity. how do you guys go about that process? You start with like, how do you even identify where you're going to look for an acquisition?
Well, the first one was really easy because that was my dad. So it was like, hey, you got to sell to me or I'll go figure something else out, which he never, there was no question on that. The other one we're an Erie agency. That's one of our biggest carriers, and Erie's just one of those quirky companies that, they like Erie on Erie transactions. So, just talking with field reps, going to Erie meetings and meeting with the people. Kilgo kind of beats me up on this one because he asked, how do I meet all these people? I said, well, you go to these meetings and you sit down at the table with the older guys, and you sit down and you start talking to them.
Right.
And you become their friends. And then when they want to sell, it's, hey, Joe, I want to sell to you. So, it's kind of just sitting down and building the relationships with them so that they feel comfortable that their book of business is going to be handled.
It's interesting. Erie is a carrier that comes up all the time. Like even inside Killing Commercial, we've got so many Erie agents, and we don't have them in Florida, but they remind me a lot of what Auto Owners is like, or some of these others that aren't really. I mean, I guess they're regional. I didn't realize Auto Owners was as regional as what they are until I looked at their footprint, but it's kind of the same way. And I mean, that makes the acquisition a lot smoother if you have a carrier like that on board, because otherwise it could go south in a hurry. Yeah. I was part of an acquisition early in my career, and we had 3 carriers that we were going to add to the mix of our agency. One was Auto Owners, one was Cincinnati, and one was Westfield. And we made the acquisition, and Westfield ended up saying, sorry, we're not going to allow you to keep our contract. We contracted with the other group, but you're out. No, we were fortunate that Auto Owners in Cincinnati went ahead and let us stay on with them. And I'm pretty sure that they're glad that they stayed on, because that agency has over 100 and some million in revenue now. So, it was a good move, but that was 15 years ago when we were just starting out. Who were we at that point? But yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point. And if people are out there looking to make acquisitions and you've never done it before, I have to have some conversations with carriers as part of the due diligence process.
Yeah.
What are some other? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and the important part of it is we got into a bidding war with another much larger. Actually, it was a bank on one of them, and they weren't going to have Erie. So, the value that they were going to bring to the table was much less than what we could, because we're looking at it as we're going to be able to maintain the Erie book of business where they're going to have runoff, and they've got to account for that. Our contingency checks are going to be much larger because now we've grown our book by $1 million plus versus, they're going to be looking at moving a lot of that.
What are some other things you look at when you're talking to these guys, when you guys are playing dominoes and drinking coffee or whatever it is you do with the old guys when you're building your relationship? What are some other things that you look for as you get down that road that you think are important?
Yeah, I mean, carrier, the book split up, like how their book is set up. We look a lot into the, commercial lines versus personal lines. And then their financials. Financials are a huge part of it for me. I don't know why I just have gotten into digging into the financial side of books. A lot of them you'll hear a lot of people say, oh yeah, 2 times revenue or 2.5 times revenue on that book of business. I'm one that uses right now EBITDA, but now I'm even looking, because of Warren Buffett and his way of valuing businesses is more on the cash flow side. So the last few months, I've been digging into how he's valuing them from a cash flow standpoint and seeing if that's a viable option in future acquisitions.
Talk about that a little bit. So what's Buffett's stance on that, and how would that translate, or how are you attempting to translate that into the agency world?
Yeah, so he's looking at free cash flow is kind of what he looks for. So he's trying to see how much free cash flow is in a business. You're taking a lot of the expenses out of that. So like loans and the interest that you're paying on those loans, the amortizations on those, you're pulling a lot of that out to find the key free cash flow. So if they didn't have those specific expenses, in the business, how much money would be coming into it, and then he can determine, how much cash is going to be on hand. And then the hard part of it from my standpoint is figuring out, are you taking that time? From an EBITDA standpoint, most that I've talked to are 7, between 6.5 on the smaller side, 6.5 and 7.5 times EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. And then, that's what they're looking at. So you're talking to the big boys, like Arthur Gallagher and those guys that are trying to buy. They're offering much higher numbers, like 10, 12. I talked to one and he was like 14. But what they put in there is a lot of contingencies within their buy sells. So
Yeah,
we
I
don't
mean, like
offer that.
earn out agreements and all kinds of
Yep.
stuff like that. I mean, that's the last thing you want as an agency owner, is to have to stick around for 5 years or whatever. It's what do you see as being the span? What's the difference typically between EBITDA and net profit, or even what's typically? So I mean, I hear the same stuff, right? If I have an agency that does $1 million in revenue, and I'm going to keep the numbers round because I'm not that good at large number math. I can do small stuff, but if I'm looking at $1 million revenue agency, what would be a reasonable amount that I could expect EBITDA to be?
It just depends on their expenses. It's business to business, and it's one thing. I see a lot of people talk about. And Nick had a guy on and talked a little bit about financial stuff. And even when I look at these books, you see them put things in their financials, and I'm honest when I look at it, so I pull them out and I say, look, this isn't gonna ding you, but like I've watched people buy football tickets through their business. They're putting cars, or not mom, but their wife's car and their kids' cars through the business. They're just writing off as much as they can through the business because they're trying to save from a tax perspective.
But it's crushing their valuation.
It's crushing their valuations. And so when you're looking at it from an EBITDA perspective, their expenses are super high, and it's pulling down their profits. And so when you look at it and you're trying to value it, if you're not honest with it and you're pulling those out, they're going to get much lower number than what they're thinking on when everybody's talking 2 or 2.5 times revenue. They're looking at 2 to 2.5 million. Well, now they may be looking at 1 because they've pulled so much money out of their business.
When you've been looking at the free cash flows, have you found any trends or anything interesting when you're looking at that?
Not yet. I haven't done enough.
Yeah.
We've bought 3, and so I've looked at 5 of them. I made a mistake on my first one on just trying to figure out a valuation. That's the way I learned that, like, this isn't the right way to value a book of business. I was like, they had a progressive book. Well, I'm going to value that at 1.2, and then they had other books of business, E&S business, that's 1. And it's too hard to value each specific book based off of that. So the way I look at it is, it's revenue's revenue, irregardless of how it's made. It's the commission that we're earning. So I can't break out progressive and say that that's worth less. It may devalue it from a time standpoint on the EBITDA side, but I can't value just that specific part and say, well, this is worth less because the commissions it's progressive. So I just look at revenue's revenue and then overall value it. If it's 7 times because I'm going to be able to earn larger contingencies, I can pay them a little bit more, 7, 8 times EBITDA, because I'm going to get more value out of that book for somebody else.
I'm going to do this as a favor to you, Joe. You're going to have to be really careful, because if you start acting and thinking like Buffett, Kilgo's not going to talk to you anymore. Like, Kilgo won't even have lunch with Buffett anymore. He told us that on the podcast. He went twice, but he hosted him the third time.
No thanks, Buffett.
Yeah. Well, Warren and Geico, I mean, he's a smart guy. I just don't know about the Geico situation he's got going on.
Yeah, no kidding, man. So listen, you're working in the agency with your wife. You're acquiring agencies with your wife. There's probably a lot of people out there right now that are thinking to themselves, what the heck does that look like? I mean, I don't know that I could handle. Look, I love my wife to death, but I also love my time at the office every day. When I'm not home. What's that look like? And I know you guys have some content that you're putting out right now that talks about it. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we started a podcast for richer or poorer. It's not specific to the insurance industry. It's more specific to husband wife owned businesses. We have friends that own husband wife owned businesses, so we thought it would be good. I get asked a lot, and so does she. Like, how do you work with your spouse? I had to strangle mine or whatnot. So we thought we would answer some of those questions in our podcast and just have people on to talk a little bit
That's
about that.
interesting. I mean, I used to
But
work
yeah,
with my wife as well, but we weren't in the same like office very often. I mean, we would be in there in the morning, and then at the evening, but like during the day, we were out, you know, making sales calls. So it wasn't like we were sitting in a cubicle next to each other or we could walk down the hall. And so I think that would be a different dynamic. I don't know that I would be able to do that.
yeah, it's actually well, we're having a hard time right now because she's not in the office because our kids are doing e-learning. So it's different because normally if I have an idea and I'm like probably up there with Dave on this, that I just have ideas that come out of nowhere, and then I'm running to her office to like tell her, hey, here's this new idea I want to run with, and she'll either shoot me down or be like, yeah, go ahead, or just listen to the crap I'm going to spew.
Speaking of which, man, before I forget, I remember the last conversation that you and I had, and we need to have an offline conversation about something that
Okay.
Todd Tams is working on
Okay.
that I want to share with you that I think might couple nicely with what your idea was regarding the audit stuff.
All right. Yeah, I'm always interested in that stuff.
Yeah, he's got some cool things. I'm not. All you have to wait to hear about it. I'm not going to tell anybody, live right now. That's up to him to reveal. But
Yeah.
he and I talked earlier this week, and he's got some pretty crazy stuff.
He's a smart man.
From a technology standpoint that's going on. Oh yeah, definitely. Love talking to him. I always feel like I learned something when I talk to Todd. Speaking of technology, I mean, you're going through these acquisitions. What's that look like, man, with the tech from a tech perspective? I mean, that
Man,
to me, that's got to be, to me, that's probably the scariest part of it. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. If you can get through that, aside from the fact you have to assimilate people into a different culture, that's standard practice. That's to be expected. But good God, I mean, there's so many different agency management systems and everything else out there. What are you looking at from a technology standpoint when you're in these agencies trying to figure out if it's something you want to do?
It's a mess. I'm be honest on that. It's a mess, and it's you're talking to people that are 65 plus years old. They've been some of the one was a 7-person shop, and their staff is about the same age. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's my dad's. Same with my dad's age, but they're technology wise they're just way behind. They don't have the infrastructure. They're not using the AMS systems the way that we use them. They still have huge filing cabinets stashed with stuff, and it's a mess. I mean, we had 3 management systems at one time that we were trying to run through from the acquisitions.
When you see that, though, I've got to believe that affects the valuation that you're going to give them, knowing the heavy lifting.
I didn't depreciate that at all. Just knowing that we're going to move it all into our systems. Actually, when I look at it, I know that some of the one we moved pretty quickly out of their system. We still had one open contract just to go back and look at it, but we could remove some of those expenses out of it. So we knew that was going to be a cost savings once we took it over. The big part of it is just they don't document the same way we document. They have files. So we had to we had interns. Actually, I had to hire my mom for a short period of time, and she scanned in tons of paper and just attached them to the files on our end.
When you said you had to hire your mom, the first thing I thought about was, I bet there were fresh cookies in the break room every day. Like if somebody's mom worked here,
that'd be so legit.
Yeah, that is exactly what it would be like, and it would be horrible.
Oh yeah, she did. She loves, like, she's not Hispanic, but she grew up she lived in Guatemala, so she brought in like black beans and like fresh tortillas and stuff. So that was right up my alley. That's what I'm talking about. I'm a big cooker.
Very
She's got
versatile,
me into that.
man. You can do a lot of different
Mexican
things.
breakfasts or my favorite thing.
Yeah.
Oh, black beans, corn tortillas, eggs with avocado. It's like, that's the breakfast of champions right there.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's interesting because different parts of the world do things differently. Obviously, there's a freaking just rocket science moment I gave everybody. But I went to Nicaragua a couple of years ago, and the thing that blew me away about Nicaragua was these little fried cheese cubes that they served with every single meal, like this queso frito, and you just take it. So I didn't realize that we even had it anywhere normal in the United States, but Sam's has these massive blocks of it that you can buy. So when I'm not behaving on my eating, that's an every Saturday morning thing. And now my youngest son, Ethan, loves it. So every Saturday when we wake up, or when he wakes up and subsequently we wake up, it's because he's running across the family room at the top of his lungs, screaming, fried cheese, make me fried cheese now. We laugh all the time. It's like Will Ferrell in Wedding Crashers with the meatloaf. That's what he is, but it's whatever it is that he wants.
So is it just like breaded?
No, you
cheese
just fry
that
the
you
cheese
fry,
and it softens and turns and like puts like a brown fried
outside,
coat around the outside, and it's gooey in the middle. Oh my goodness.
I'm gonna have to try this.
Sounds fantastic.
You put a video up on the
I will.
On how you make those.
There's a 100% chance that's getting made this weekend, because it's my first weekend since Whole30, and we'll be able to do it. When you're moving the technology stuff around, I mean, I don't know a lot about having to change AMSs, and I hope I never have to know anything about that, but I'm sure I will. That's a horrible process in and of itself, right? In terms of getting the data dump and the fact you have to pay to have somebody do that and then get it all set up. And I mean, I would imagine, talk a little bit about that process, because the sequencing has to matter too. Do you document everything in the old system before you migrate it so that it's at least documented the way you do it? Or do you get the data dumped to where you can put it into your new system and then wait until then to do your file audits and everything and get your documentation in order?
Yeah, so one of them, they basically had nothing in their system. It was just basic contact info. So that was an easy transaction. Like, hey, we're just dumping contact info into it. Then we were scanning that's when we scanned in all of their paper, from written notes to signed deck pages or applications, and we were scanning those and attaching them to the file. The other one was with TAM, which is Applied owned, and what we moved to was Epic, which is Applied owned. So that was super easy. I don't even think they charged us when we made that transition, and then we moved all of our stuff over into Applied Epic. So we were documenting, and most of that moved over. What didn't move over, we used our VAs, and they were able to, prior about, I think they worked on it for like 2 months, pull reports, get all of that information, and then start putting that into the new system. So they pulled all of the reports. I didn't touch any of this. That's probably why I'm like, it's not that hard. It wasn't that bad. But we left it to our VAs and the team that we have.
Well, it's interesting that you said you used VAs to do it, because I think that there are a lot of people out there that are changing systems that have figured out that may be the ticket, right? I was talking to Bradley Flowers this last week, and we were talking about him moving everything over to Neon, and part of his heartburn was the amount of money that they wanted to charge him for the data migration. But he said that they found that using VAs was the way to go. It ended up being more cost effective and really didn't take anything at all away from the process.
Yeah, I mean, our VAs are fantastic. I mean, they probably know the system better than me. They may know it better than most of our staff. They're in it all the time. So,
Who do you use, if you don't mind me asking?
no, we use CoverDesk.
Okay.
And we have 3 VAs, and we've had them. One I think is about a year and 2 months, and the other ones are almost at 2 years. So I wouldn't go back from having them. They're part of our team. I mean, we love them. If we didn't have them, we'd be in a lot of trouble.
You know, it's funny because I need them. Like, I need VAs bad, and I've known this. And the problem that I have is I'm in this like death spiral right now, because I know in order for me to scale properly, I need to have people doing, look, management 101. I have to delegate to the lowest level of competency. And I'm doing things I shouldn't be doing. The problem is that I'm going to have to like just put the brakes on or draw the process out and get everything I want to offload recorded on Loom, transcribed, give them the instructions, get them up to speed. Who knows what the process looks like for that? You know what I mean? For me, it's very, very scary to think we've got all of these cool things we do, and we don't run like a normal agency does. So everything I do almost is unique to my firm. So it's not like I can go to a place that's worked with other agencies that VAs have a general idea of how to do things, because almost every other agency they work with isn't basically running their business off of HubSpot as opposed to an AMS. You know, that's for starters. And a lot of the automation stuff that we do and how we handle our proposals and all that other stuff. And that's what freaks me out, is I know that I'm going to have to do that. So this week, literally, I just now started. If I go, I think before I do anything at all, I think to myself, is this something that down the road I may be in a position to outsource to a VA? And if the answer is yes, I've just started building a library of me doing basic tasks so that I can have that taken care of, by VAs going forward. But I really think it'll be 6 months before I'm ready to bring the first one on, just based on the volume of things I have to document. Because we have processes, they're just not documented very well.
Yeah, I mean, I actually was on about a 45-minute call with a guy today who's looking at hiring one for commercial stuff, and I was just telling him how we use them, and it was a game changer for us from a commercial standpoint, and allowing us to be more free with our time to get out and do the things that generate revenue. They're putting they're doing all of our quoting. We don't touch it. You're getting a list of 75, 100 vehicles or drivers lists that are mile long, and they're putting all that into the systems, and we're not. And that just saves so much time.
Yeah, absolutely. How do your carriers view that? So I know that there's been some pushback when we've had that conversation in the past. I mean, specifically, I remember our rep from Progressive was in, and he was pretty adamant about the fact that they check IP addresses to see where people are logging in and all of this stuff. And I know obviously the industry has moved that way a little bit, but if you had run into any issues with your carriers, or do they, well, by the way, if they don't know you're using VAs,
they
they're listening to this, I guess they do now, but have you had any of those kinds of conversations? Because that was something that actually kind of scared me a little bit as far as what we would be able to do, have them do and not.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some talks with them. Some of them were worried on what they were doing or being able to access it. I mean, they have access to everything else. It's, okay, you don't give them access to your website, but they have access to our AMS system, 100% access. They can get the same information that you think you're hiding from not giving them permission to do a quote. The issue is that you're just going to slow our process down, and we'll just figure out a way around it. We'll give them our passwords and usernames. I'll figure out a way to make it work. And I trust our VAs like I trust our employees. They're probably the most trustworthy people that we have. So I tell them all the time, these are specific to our agency. This isn't like, 100 different VAs in an office that are working for us, and it's a different one every time. It's the same person every time. And I think that the IP stuff, they're using AWS, which puts the like VPNs into like a New York IP address. So they have no clue that they're based out of the Philippines.
How do you get them to fit in with your culture?
Man, they fit in great. It's crazy. I don't know how. I guess we kind of do. So we pull them into everything. I mean, they're in all of our emails. They're in all of our like our communication. We have Zoom meetings. We pull them into the Zoom meetings for Monday morning meetings. If we're doing an event like a team meeting where we're all getting together, like, we didn't do it this last time because COVID over there. They're still kind of in lockdown, but we would order food for them so that they could get together and have a meeting. You know, if we're taking off, they're taking off. We give them the same rights. So we used Matt and Zach, and we're doing some Babylon training. We pull them into it. They're in that training with us. You know, they're doing the traction stuff where they have their own little projects that they're working on, like we have our projects. So, you know, they're doing everything that our team here is doing.
Interesting.
They earn bonuses. So like if we have a commercial bonus that we hit or a personal lines bonus that we hit, they get paid on their bonus as well. Not the same dollar figure because, you know, a dollar over there is going to go a lot further than a dollar here, but they still get bonused on those.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I use Jason Cass's group to do the podcast production for us. And he uses, you know, a couple of VAs over in the Philippines, and that's who actually does the editing, you know, show notes, all of that for us. And I was talking to Cass a couple of weeks ago, and I just said, look, Riza does an awesome job, man. I'm really happy with what she does. I'd like to do something above and beyond for her. What does that look like? Tell me what I could do to show her how much I appreciate what she does for me. Because I'll be honest with you, brother, if I had to do the podcast production, there would be no podcast. I mean, Cass's program that he has put together is so turnkey. If anybody is thinking about doing a podcast, they're crazy not to let them produce it, because we do this recording like this, and that's it. I'm out. This goes into a Dropbox, and the next time I see it is when I pump it to social to get it out when it's getting ready to drop. And I do the teasers and that, but I like doing that, so it doesn't feel like I'm doing any work. So unbelievable. I'm just very, very impressed with the quality of work, you know, very responsive, very proactive in communication if she notices something. So I just reached out and said, I'd like to do something nice. What does that look like? What's her interest? And he's like, well, you know, she's not really interested in much. She lives with her mom. They don't, you know, she doesn't really go out at night or whatever. He said, but if you gave her $100, she would think she won the lottery. I'm like, done. $100. Come on. I made a lot of dumb $100 decisions in my day. Took me 8 years. Took me 8 years to get through college, for crying out loud. How many C notes do you think I blew in that time frame? But anyhow, I sent her $100, and she sent me this email back that she just sat and stared at the screen in disbelief that I'd sent her this money, and was just falling all over herself about how appreciative she was that we did it. We take so much for granted. We don't even think about things like that. And shame on the agencies out there that are using VAs to save money, and they don't think about doing the stuff like that. Because let's face it, $100, yeah, maybe if you're somebody's grandma that grew up, you know, like mine in the Great Depression, $100 is still a lot of money to them just because of how they have gone through life. But for me, $100 is nothing. Yeah. You know, I can make $100 pretty quick, you know, doing a lot of things. If you want to, if you've got to hustle, you can go out and find.
Dude,
I knew that was coming as soon as it came out of my mouth. And I'm surprised you didn't tie Nicaragua into it somehow too. But anyhow, you know, I look at it, $100, you know, you can earn that in an afternoon if you want to go chop firewood for somebody, you know, or whatever. I just, it doesn't seem like a lot, but to know that that makes that kind of an impact on people, why wouldn't you want to do that? And listen, if you're doing it for selfish reasons, when you reward people and you stroke them for doing the things that you want them to do, that makes them that much more motivated to replicate doing those things, right? And I mean, I was talking to Miles Merwin a couple of weeks ago about him using virtual assistants because he and I and a few other people inside Killing Commercial are working on a project right now where we're going to base it off of a platform of VAs. And I know Miles has 3 or 4 that he uses. And he was telling me that his agency paid $500 and bought a stove for one of their guys that was a VA that just did awesome work because the guy didn't have a stove where he lived. And I mean, you think about those things and it's just like, holy cow, man, we have so much that we can't even keep track of everything we have. And here's a guy who doesn't even have doesn't even have a stove in his house. To me, I'd be like, okay, well, give me 4 more people that are VAs. And if they work like this guy, I'll buy every single one of them a stove, and we'll get the matching microwave to go with it next month if they hit their numbers. So I'm interested because part of what we're looking at doing would be business development to a certain degree. When I know you said that you have bonuses in place, like if you guys get a bonus that's shared, at a reasonable level based on the value of the dollar there versus here and all of that. But do you have like an actual structure or anything like that you put into place where if VAs get certain things done, they qualify for more money from you, or how does that work?
Not specifically for the VAs. It's based off our department. So, like personal lines, if they hit certain tiers, they earn a bonus, and they're part of that bonus. If commercial lines hit certain tiers, they earn a bonus, and they're getting paid on that. And the reason why is like it's new business and retention. Those are the 2 main drivers, and they can impact that. They're sending out emails and things to people. They're providing information to us, and as soon as they get it to us, if it's good or whatever they provided to us is working well, then we retain clients, or if they go out and they shop an account with 5 carriers and we get good pricing and are competitive and we write the account, they did most of the work on the back end and are just feeding that to us to close. So we're trying to build. I'm trying to build it a little bit differently from a commercial standpoint and hiring true hunters, producers that just purely hunt all day, bring back the deck pages and the information, put in there what they want quoted, write up their summaries, send it to the VA, and then they're shopping everything out for them and then putting in a nice little bow on it and sending it back and saying, here's everything you need.
Doing all the back end stuff. Yeah.
So that they're just closing, closing accounts versus, quoting it up, doing all the back end stuff. So, one thing that I'm struggling with is trying to figure out a comp plan that for our, when we do bring on some commercial producers that would fit well with that structure, because they're just going to hunt all day. They're not going to do any of the service work. They're not going to do anything else. It's purely hunting.
Yeah. And that's really, truthfully, where we're sort of headed with what we're trying to develop on the back end. I'm a big believer from a marketing standpoint that the more things you're doing, the better chances you all have of bringing business in. So, we've got those core accounts that the producers are going to want to maintain, trying to get in front of. Kyle is going to go out. He may have his top 25 that he's already had some level of communication with or whatever else. And the expectation would be that he continue to manage those relationships. And then we have drip email campaigns that we have go out based off the 12-month solicitation calendar that I developed. Then we get into all of the direct mail. We can do telemarketing and things inside the agency. But to me, there's only so much time in the day to be able to do all those things. So what ends up getting missed is those soft touches, right? Maybe the 2 or 3 phone calls that you have to make before you can actually get to the point. Somebody will talk to you, maybe give you the opportunity to overcome objection, set an appointment or whatever else. And that's what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to set a wide net that we can canvas all of that stuff that's going to get ignored under normal circumstances that are actually still really good prospects for us. They're just not far enough along in the process to get our attention. And they shouldn't get our attention because it's going to take a long time to do it. And so what I fear happens most of the time is we have all of this stuff in our pipeline. And yeah, we might be dripping on it and doing whatever, but we're not really doing everything we can. And I think telemarketing firms, by and large, tend to be way more expensive than what they're worth. So anytime I run into that problem in life, I just go build my own mousetrap for whatever it is that they're doing. And I try and make it in a way that, number one, it's more cost effective for me, but also scalable. So that's really what we're doing. And truthfully, in the VA model, if we can get this right, it's going to be huge for us because we can cap our expense. We were running the numbers yesterday. We had an exploratory call with everybody in Killing Commercial, probably had 30 agents on there because they're all interested, right? You go to a telemarketing firm, it's expensive up front. You typically have to pay extra money if they get an appointment booked, or it could be some of them are licensed 220s. They want a percentage of any booked revenue that you get. Whereas with the VA, you can cap it at an hourly rate. And then if I look at how I want to set a bonus structure, I can do that, but we have some freedom to do that. Mm-hmm. My idea is take everybody in Killing Commercial that wants to be part of this, aggregate them together, go to the VA company and say, we want 4,000 hours a month from you. What's the rate?
Yeah.
What's the VA company care? They don't care what these people are doing. They're making their money on the spread between what they're paying that person and what they're charging me. So volume is good for them. And if I can guarantee that kind of volume, I should get some efficiency in my pricing. But what I really want to do is get one and have them be really, really good. And then that one knows the process. Now we can get 2 and 3 and 4. And the next thing you know, we're operating at a really high level. And then I'll take it to a whole different level, because I have the ability to where I can include them inside the social network that I've built on Killing Commercial. I can give them their own profiles. And since they're collectively calling for everybody in there, I'll gamify it. I'll give them different badges depending on number of calls booked so that they have status inside the social network. I can bonus them off of that if they hit determined metrics. And we can just continue to breed this massive snowball that's going to continue to grow just through motivation and rewarding them in public the right way and also monetarily. And I got to believe it's going to work. The hard part is figuring out how to get the first one right. Once you do that, you can replicate them.
Yeah. And I mean, they're phenomenal. The ones we're working with, and I'm sure wherever you're looking, I was telling the guy today, they go above and beyond what our expectations are. I mean, we had one that on her time off, she created her own video to show our new app and how it worked and put together the video. And, we didn't even ask her that. And then the other one, she's like, oh yeah, I've been studying SEO and social media stuff. And she's the one that's been doing our podcast. So she's going to be changing up our podcast, putting in all that stuff, editing it, cleaning it up. She's cleaning up all of our videos that we're having on our YouTube channel. So it's just like, we didn't ask them to do this. All of a sudden, they're just jumping in to do it. And wherever you go, I'm sure you're going to find the same thing. I don't know, ours are in the Philippines, and I think it's that culture. They're just there to appease people.
Right. Are you guys using any type of CRM, like the Salesforce integration with Epic?
We haven't. We're looking at HubSpot. So to start.
You say you're looking at it, or you?
Yeah,
haven't?
we're in the free version, so we're not really doing too much with it.
Feel free to reach out, man.
Okay.
I am agnostic on systems, even though I use HubSpot. I still look at it agnostically, and it's really interesting because for years I have said, like, there's no chance that I'll move from there. But I got to tell you, I am very much surprised. I ask too many questions to get through any kind of a demo in one session. So I'm only a portion of the way through Neon, and I'd seen Neon at BrainShare last year, and it's come a long way since then. And I told Sydney when I took the call to do the demo, hey, look, I believe in everything you guys are doing. We've got an audience that listens to us. I'm happy to be a mouthpiece for you to further it. I get the concept. Financially, it doesn't matter to me because I'm not a good prospect for you. I've invested over $100,000 in HubSpot. I've got it built to a certain degree. I'm going to continue to customize it. So just know up front, the reason I want the demo is to understand the product and then be able to articulate that if people ask. Because people ask me about stuff all the time. I want to at least have a working knowledge of it.
Yeah.
They got me, Joe. They got
Yeah.
me. I mean, I looked at the stuff that they had in there, and I'm starting to think to myself, well, $100,000 in the long term. And I'm not saying that I'm interested in making the move yet because I still have to get through the rest of the demo, but good grief at the level of data that they can provide. And, again, I just have so many things to weigh. Am I going to be in the game another 5 years, 10 years? I don't know, so that all factors into my decision too. That's why I'm building rapport with you right now, Joe. I want you to buy my agency here in a few years when I'm ready to retire.
It's a tough market down there. That's a tough market, Florida.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's crazy. So with regard to, I know you said you looked at HubSpot, but have you explored the Salesforce integration with Epic yet? Because I've got agents that I'm Josh Gurley. You probably don't know Josh, but he's in Killing Commercial, and I would be happy to make that introduction for you. They just went all the way through the full-blown applied Epic integration with Salesforce, with Pardot and everything, and love it. Yeah. And could give you all kinds of information about it.
Well, I'm probably in the same boat as you. I've been looking at Neon for quite a while, or since, basically since last year when it kind of came on the scene. I think Cass was the one that brought it up at the Vegas IAOA event.
He did. He talked about it a little bit when he was on stage there, yeah. And
then I kind of got intrigued, and I was on a call with Sydney and Seth a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just blown away. Actually, I got yelled at not only by my wife but our staff because we just moved to Epic, and they're like, well, "What are you looking at? What's the future?" And I'm like, "Well, we're going to probably be here for like 2 years, and then we'll be moving to Neon." Like, we're not moving management systems again. I'm like, I'm just telling you, your lives are going to be so much easier if we can get into this system. And so, that's kind of where I pulled back on, like HubSpot's free. How much do I want to invest in putting all this stuff together if I know in a year and a half, 2 years, we're going to be moving?
And I would tell you right now, without even having any further conversation, don't. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the problem. That's why it's so much of a struggle for me, is because I'm looking at the money that's been invested and I'm looking at what we've had to do to build it out. And that's the problem. When you get a CRM like a Salesforce or a HubSpot or an Infusionsoft, you're getting a blank you're getting a chassis. That's it. You still have to build the whole car, engine, put the gas in the tank and everything. And that's not cheap. It's not easy. And it's not free. It's not free at all. I don't want to have to know how to do that. So I outsourced all of that. That's another expense to me every month. And it's money well spent. I'm not complaining about it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with HubSpot in our agency. I'm happy with them. Mm-hmm. I just saw some things that are like, that's something that would be worth knowing, right? Like, because I am the type that if I had that kind of data, let's just say there's a carrier that's making me work 37% more than another carrier, yet they're paying me two less points on commission. Well, now I've got the data to go to that carrier and say, 2 less points, you should be paying me 5 points more. Look at how much time I'm having to spend servicing your accounts. Your systems are clunky. You're not going to spend the money to upgrade your technology. You're going to have to give me some sort of financial reward for continuing to place business with you in addition to standard commission, because I've got other people that are way more efficient that pay me more money to give them the same business.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the data that they're going to be able to provide is just off the charts crazy. And it just, once we get access to that, it's going to change the way that we play. Just like you said, I mean, we're going to be able to go to our carriers and say, this is, you're behind times. We need to either catch up or figure out a different way to do business.
Well, and the thing that I like the most about it, that's one thing that I like. I'm all about numbers. I'm all about managing by reports. When you run a grocery store or a retail operation, especially like if you're 100 million or more a year in sales, like, some of the super targets and things that I had been in, you have to run your business by report. You have to have accurate information every day because you're going to make decisions that could cost a lot of money otherwise. And, the thing that I like about what Neon's data provides is also the operational data on individual employees, to see. And that's what I originally wanted to accomplish with HubSpot, was to be able to have one central place where we could go and have our marketing automations, our sales stuff, and also the service stuff that we do. So we do all of our tasks, all of our ticketing, all of that stuff inside HubSpot. And I could go in and I can run reports and I can see those things. The thing that if I were being critical about that product, the thing that bothers me, or I would say that would set Neon apart from that, I don't know that Neon gets that much more data than what HubSpot is capable of getting, because HubSpot can do just about anything you tell it to do. Just like Neon was built on a Salesforce platform, I could create Dave's awesome product and put it inside a HubSpot and do the same thing. I'm not smart enough to do that, but if I was, I could. But what I like about it is I can go in and see, okay, in a dashboard, boom, here's how my service team is performing. That's what I need. And that's what I like about HubSpot, specifically with the ticketing, because I can go into the dashboard, and if I see a bunch of tickets stacked up in a column, okay, there's a problem here. Let's drill down in this column and see why we're getting lost in this stage of the process. It's fine. I just think Neon's sexier, man, and how they present that information, and it's already done without you having to go through several stages to create some of that reporting that you would have to create.
And what Seth blew my mind when when I was talking to him is that like it's going to start telling what service person to handle a certain task based off of how fast they're completing that task. You know, an auto change, if I complete it 15 minutes faster than the next person, I'm going to get more auto changes. And that's huge to us, is like just understanding, okay, this person's processing it 15 minutes faster than that person. We need to be pushing that stuff to them because they're going to get that task done quicker, and it's going to save us time and money in the long run.
Yeah, I think that they take analytics to such a different level than anybody else out there. It's and you know, it's exciting to see. But the other thing, if I'm, you know, looking at this from a very, again, agnostic and logical perspective, it's also sad because I know that they're going to be the first, but somebody's going to come along behind them, and they're going to figure out what the next mousetrap is going to be. So hopefully what happens is these guys get this thing out, they change the way the game is played, and they'll forever be known as the ones who changed the way the game has been played. Listen, I hope they last forever. Yeah. They say they're never going to sell out. I believe that that's the case. I also had an accounting professor when I was in college for 8 years one time that told me everybody has a price. It's just a matter of what that number is.
Man, that was a conversation Nick and Preston had at a conference. I don't think I've ever laughed so hard on what your dollar figure is. I don't know if you've had that conversation with him before, but
okay. So I'm going to go ahead and say,
but I don't think I've ever cried laughing so hard in my life.
So number one, yes, it was. I've had that conversation with them. Number two, it was even more awkward because my disgusted wife was sitting right next to me when that conversation.
I didn't have that. She wasn't with me, but
yeah, and they didn't realize, you know, what was going on. But yeah, no, I know exactly which conversation you're talking about. And Cass and his wife were also sitting there.
Oh
so
boy,
they got even more animated. But it's crazy. I have one more question before we wrap up because I've got a theory. I'm interested in what your thoughts are. And I've talked about this a lot on podcasts the last little bit, so I'm not going to belabor it. But I like to ask different people from different parts of the country with different experience levels what they think is going to happen in the near future. And I think that, and you validated some of what I think just based on conversation today, but I feel like COVID is going to be a defining point for the perpetuation of a lot of agencies, and that it's natural selection to a certain degree, in that these agencies that are older, that don't have the technology and don't have the documentation in place, and they're operating out of filing cabinets, and they're not doing quote vids, and they're not doing Zoom meetings, they're gonna go away. I think that what's going to happen is the multiples that people have been able to get for their books of business are going to diminish because these agencies aren't equipped to go to the next level. And we were actually on a call. Kyle, I think it was a podcast we were on, but I'm not 100% sure. It may have been the one with Greg Zahn, but I don't think it was. But there was actually a guy who said, you know what, I was thinking about selling my agency, but instead I'm just going to quit servicing my accounts and let them run off as they want, and I'll make more money over 5 years than if I would have sold them. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, what do you think, if you're putting on your anti-Kilgo Warren Buffett hat, what do you think is going to happen, or do you have any ideas that you think we're going to see with how some of these agencies are treated in the acquisition marketplace in the next couple of years?
I think we're going to see more of them, of the older agency owners that are going to be tired of it. I mean, it's stressful. You know, you're when everything shut down, the agencies around us were all still, people were still going into their offices. We pulled, I think we've pulled two, one employee from one recently because of that. They're sending them into work where we're all working from home. We still have the technology to work and operate. And we were getting quite a bit of business from one agency here in town just because his doors were shut. He was in there working, or when he would leave, he was at home or shut down for a time period when everything was closed and they couldn't get call. He couldn't pick up a call. He couldn't answer the call. And he's a paper company. I mean, 100%, there's no agency management system. And that's been a talk like, well, okay, from one of our carriers, hey, if you're would you buy him out? It'd be really hard for me too, because I know that everything is in filing cabinets, and I've gone down that road, and the valuation is going to be dropping for those guys. You're telling me that an Arthur Gallagher or one of these big firms is going to come in and want to scan all this paper in and take over that book of business? That's a lot of work for what they're going to be paying for. They're not going to be paying the 10 times or 14 times or 12 times EBITDA. They're going to be devalued, at least in my mind, when those come around.
That's exactly what I think too. And what's crazy about what you just said is Gallagher's got the resources to pull that off as quick as possible, but they'll just leverage the price down and make it a better transaction for them. And I do think that's what's going to happen. I think that the people that are going to be willing to get out probably waited too long. They should have either adapted some new technology or gotten out years ago.
And the guys that are, and I think that the guys that's telling you, I'm just going to write it out, I mean, that may work for 2 or 3 years, but these carriers are starting to get pretty picky on it too. Hey, where's our, how often do you hear, where's your growth? What are you doing? Why aren't you quoting us? Why, we want more, we want more, we want more. What's their comeback going to be to them when they say, yeah, I'm just writing this thing out. Well, you know what? Your contract's terminated. You're going to have to figure out what you're going to do with this book.
That's a good point.
I can see that happening too, where they're just going to say, hey, if you're not willing to invest in the technology, we can't invest in you anymore. So how many of those are going to be gone, and what carriers are going to be willing to work with those people to take book rolls and whatnot? And then that's even more work for them. So I think
it's going to be an interesting time, man. I mean, I'm glad that I have 4 years under me now, and this should be a really good year from a profit standpoint, that I'm probably going to be looking to make some acquisitions in the next couple of years just to round out what we have. Because the one issue that we have here is, by going after middle market accounts, my revenue per account is extremely skewed. So it sounds sexy that you can grow an agency, relatively quickly with good volume, but if you don't have a good number of policies in force in addition to that revenue to match up, then you've got a problem. So what I don't have is, I don't have the policy count of a personal lines division like somebody like your agency who's been in business for a while. I either have to grow it organically, or I have to acquire something, or I have to do both, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing.
Yeah, and I don't know what the market's like down there. That's probably a really tough market. Actually, I could see quite a few agencies coming up for sale just because of how tough it is. I mean, the
carriers are all pulling out. Yeah, carriers are all pulling out, and the property capacity's going away. The umbrella markets are shot. We're back to where we were in 04, 05 after the hurricanes came through, and we're going to be here for a little while. I'm used to it. I've been in this market before. It was when I first got into the industry, but it's not anything that's new to me, so I know how to navigate it.
Yeah,
and that'll be a good advantage for me. That's if there's an advantage that I have, that's one of them. Is I came up in the absolute hardest time to write this stuff, and so that might actually come back to help me now. So
it's a different market down there.
We're
not like that. It's pretty. We probably have the least expensive rates in the whole nation.
I can assure you, because I've got a guy in Indianapolis that's in Killing Commercial, and that's the one thing that he said was, how can you get me in front of stuff like you have down there? And I said, well, I'll get you a plane ticket. You can come on down because you ain't got it in Indiana, But it's a different approach. And I mean, that's the whole thing. You have to tailor your approach based on where you're at. And if you have a good process, the process works. Just the numbers don't line up the way they would for us here in Florida. So I get all of that. Well, listen, man, we've been going for an hour. You have given us a ton of really good information. I know people are going to want to reach out to you and maybe pick your brain if they're looking at doing an acquisition or whatever else. Tell them, A, how they can find you, and B, how they can find the podcast that you guys have going out so they can subscribe to that and help you get your listeners.
Yeah, we're Clevenger Insurance Agency in Warsaw, Indiana. ClevengerINS.com is the website. You can find me on there if you want to talk. For Richer or Poor, I think it's Richer or Poorer on Facebook. We just started a Facebook page, so you'll see that. We're sharing it on our Facebook page. That's kind of just my wife and I talking through being business partners and husband and wife, and hopefully people can get some good value out of that along the way. But
it's much better than the Nick and Preston conversation. I can say that unequivocally without even listening to it. Well, listen, man, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for spending some time with us. I wish you nothing but the best. You guys got some good things going on there, and I look forward to circling back with you here sometime, maybe next week, to talk about the other stuff that I had mentioned. Joe.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Have a good weekend and enjoy your Labor Day. Stay safe. I'm sure you'll be out on that lake.
Yep.
All right, brother. See you later, man.
You've been listening to the Power Producers Podcast. You can follow Killing Commercial Insurance on Facebook and YouTube. And if you want to take your game to the next level, check out our book, The Extra 2 Minutes, and our website, killingcommercial.com.